Hello and welcome to another episode of Second Gen's Liberated Panda Live, coming to you for the very first time in our studio. Joining us today is Jason, my co-host, and me, Angel. Jason?
Today we want to go over a couple different topics, one of them being Dr. Anthony Fauci and Republican Senator Rand Paul's exchange yesterday during the Fauci testimony. We also wanted to briefly touch on some of the violence going on in Israel. But first, we plan to talk about Liz Cheney being ousted from her leadership position inside of the Republican caucus of the House of Representatives. Angel, do you want to give our audience a little background on what's going on with Liz?
Yes. Okay. So this is like a big story because Liz Cheney is the daughter of Dick Cheney, who was the VP of America under George W. Bush years. You would not consider her a light or fake conservative or Republican by any means. She is your quintessential Republican, just like Mitt Romney, just like, McCain, just like the Bushes. And she is very much entrenched in the Republican Party.
But Liz Cheney is definitely not the current iteration of the Republican Party under Trump, which has taken a much more centrist populist role. She is part of the old, some people might call them rhinos, Republican in name only. But like you said, traditional Republicans, more in the mold of Mitt Romney, Bush, John McCain, maybe. Depends how you slice his career. But one of the thoughts is that Liz Cheney was ousted because a lot of the Republican House believes that the election was stolen from Trump. And she was not one of them. In fact, I believe she voted against various resolutions around that. But that could be one of the reasons why, among others. She has had a lot of recent rows with various congressional members about various things, especially some of the newer, more Trumpian congressional members.
Right. Like, I thought it was very strange that they're treating Marjorie Taylor Greene so much better than they're treating Liz Cheney. But, hold
on. The same thing happened to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
In the Democratic caucus, right? Like, they blacklisted her, blackballed her in a lot of things because they didn't, she was elected, but they didn't necessarily like her as much because of the socialism factor. They knew that some of the words she would say would be difficult to get stuff through. But she is the modern face of the Democratic Party.
Right.
So you kind of gotta, it's a give and take there.
Right. Well, but they even if they have disagreements with AOC, and AOC definitely has issues with Nancy Pelosi, like clearly, right? And I actually support her with that. But, back to Liz Cheney, because we could probably talk about AOC another time. But yesterday, Liz Cheney gave what I thought to be a very powerful speech defending her position on not endorsing the big lie, which is Trump actually won the election. And of course, just this morning, Liz Cheney, and whether you like Cheney or not, I think this was a huge misstep for the Republican Party because they're appealing to a smaller and smaller base and excluding everyone else that is moderate. Most Americans are moderate, so I don't understand what's going on with the GOP strategy. I know that the Republican Party doesn't think that this was a bad move, but I personally do. So, Jason, did you know that 52% of Wyoming Republican in Liz Cheney's state will not vote for her in the primaries, no matter who's running against her? And in addition to that, last weekend, when Mitt Romney went to give a speech in his home state of Utah, where he used to be a saint, he was booed during his speech because he doesn't stand behind Trump 100%. Have you heard about this? And do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, a lot of people will laugh at me and give me negative views for saying it, but a lot of Trump's views have been traditionally centrist. So when we're talking about traditional Republican Party, Trump does not match that mold at all. He is, in a lot of cases, a centrist. If he had run as a Democrat, people would view him differently. But some of his values align well with that. And it's funny because we always talk about Republicans taking Democrat voters during the election process. And that's what you saw with Trump when he originally got elected. He took many Democrat voters, blue-collar voters, union workers, places like southwestern Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio. And so he created his own party, and he really increased the umbrella of the Republican Party. Whether or not you agree with that, agree with Trump or not, it's just a fact of life. Now, with regards to Romney getting booed, a lot of people are very disillusioned because they want a united party that can push through their priorities. Their priorities, in a lot of cases, align with what Trump has said. And if they haven't, over time, they kind of have, because maybe they've changed their views. And Mitt Romney not supporting him, in a lot of voters' eyes, are not supporting their values and turning their back on their values because of a personal row he might have with President Trump. And that is an issue to voters because they don't want personality issues to get in the way of what they view as solving America's problems. So I can see it. And frankly, rightly so, they should boo him.
Well, we definitely have different views on this because, I mean, I personally really, really like Mitt Romney. I think he, I would have voted for him if, he wasn't going up against Obama the second term. I think that it's great that he stuck to his guns. And I don't think that we should give people, we should be encouraging this idea that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president, that democracy doesn't work. Not only is it demoralizing, it's also very bad for our foreign adversaries to, put out in their propaganda machine that, America even thinks that, America's bad and everything like that. It's just, I don't know. I'm a fan of it.
What if the Arizona audit right now, the Maricopa County audit, goes the other way? And what if they find out all these fraud votes, yada yada? It's pure hypothetical here.
Right. I mean, so the Maricopa, right.
But do you think though? Do you think Joe Biden will go to Xi Jinping or any foreign leader to conduct foreign policy, and they won't do anything other than laugh?
We don't know. We don't know yet, right? Look, I feel like we don't give Democrats enough credit, right? Look how great the economy, the economy is doing great, right? In the stock markets, right? We're actually one of the countries that's finally doing well on vaccinations, right? We're not India. We're closer to Israel than India.
Right. We were always doing pretty well on vaccinations, though. It was set up early on.
I just don't think the rollout would have been the same if it was under Trump at all.
It was literally the same rollout, though. The plan was all there. The infrastructure was all there.
But Biden was the one that came up with the we'll give Trump credit for Operation Warp Speed, for sure. But for the rollout plan, that's all Biden.
Well, what was Biden didn't change anything from the Trump plan. It was the same plan.
No, he had his own plan.
President.
So you're saying he took it from?
You effectively didn't change any rollout of the plan. There was no rollout change from the plan, and that's actually one of the core issues with it. It's that nothing really would have changed under Trump. In fact, many people think that it might have been rolled out faster and more aggressively under him. I beg to differ.
I beg to differ too. Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly think that it would have been rolled out the way that it's being rolled out now. I don't think it would have been any different.
Interesting.
It's the same plan. The states are still getting it. The states are kind of determining who should get it, who shouldn't get it. Mm-hmm. And it's decentralized. Think about it. If Biden changed his plan, it would be completely federalized because the Democratic Party is more of a federalist sort of government, whereas Republicans are much more, states' rights. And you can tell by the way that it's kind of brought out. So that right there is kind of my key indicator to show you that I really don't think it's changed. I haven't seen anything saying that it's changed.
Well, we also have to keep in mind, all of this Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney stuff is kind of crazy to me, but we also have to keep in mind when they say 50% of Republicans, 70% of Republicans, we have to understand that only the last time I checked, only 25% of Americans are registered Republicans, and the number is getting smaller. So when they say 50% of all Republicans, it's actually not that large of a number. And the fact that, you have people saying that they won't vote for Liz Cheney in the primaries means that the Republican Party is held captive to the most like the most extreme, portions of their party.
Right, except Republicans have gained more voters even leading into 2018 and leading into 2020. The 2020 election was an aberration in that every single key indicator, every single key county fell the way that it should have for Donald Trump to win. I can't imagine one indicator other than the final vote tally that fell in a different direction that would show that Joe Biden should have won. Republicans gained tons of voters left the Democratic Party. Republicans gained a lot of those in key states. There were major registration gains throughout the whole Trump presidency. Now, a lot of that you could argue was that a bunch of Democrats who voted for Trump ended up becoming Republican, which is fine. But a lot of them became independent as well. And yes, maybe only 28% or so of the country is registered Republican. But only maybe 35% are actual registered Democrats. Right. Most are registered independent.
Right.
So the Democrat Party leads in registration, but it's not massive. And Republicans typically win independent voters.
Depends.
I want to say 55-45 maybe. I don't know. It depends on the area. But typically, like Trump won independents, for example.
Right.
He won 95% of Republicans and independents.
But like all of this seems crazy to me.
And I think a second too, to be honest.
So, I mean, I think the state of our politics is crazy because the more moderate and reasonable Republicans in the GOP are being overrun by another form of the Republican Party that I frankly do not like and do not identify with.
Both parties. Both parties are. The Democratic
both
Party
parties,
is what?
Right. No, but I'm actually very happy with the way things are going with Joe Biden. So I know you have your issues with him, but let's see. Like it's month 5 and there's still a lot to go. So we'll see on his foreign policy and everything like that. See if like you're right. So that's a Liz Cheney story. Very disappointed with the GOP, but moving on to our next story, which also has to do with Liz Cheney, and this time it involves her husband. So Jason, do you want to tell us a bit about this story?
Liz Cheney's husband, Philip Perry, works for a law firm that has offices in Shanghai and Beijing and has been noted as being a collaborator with the Chinese Communist Party per the U.S. State Department. The law firm is called Latham & Watkins, a very large multinational law firm. And I mean, it's a high-ranking congressperson's significant other working in a law firm that the State Department has noted works maybe not hand in glove, but closely with the CCP. Do you see why this could be a problem, Angel?
Yeah, honestly, I gotta say, from a legal and business perspective, I have absolutely no issues with this. I mean, I do have an issue with this, personally, but just not from a business or legal perspective. And I'll tell you why. It's because Liz Cheney's husband's working for Latham & Watkins, and you mentioned that they, a very world-renowned law firm. A lot of my friends also work for them, and like me personally, I've also worked on deals where the Chinese or like foreign governments have been involved, especially Saudi Arabia and everything. And it's just like you don't know you're not supposed to work with them unless the government says something. So if the government doesn't say something, then like I feel like you're totally in the clear. So I personally don't see anything wrong with Liz Cheney's husband working at law firms that provide legal services in connection with Chinese deals or having offices in main Chinese cities like Shanghai or Beijing, because most big law firms do. This is very normal for them. So I think this is very much a nothing burger, except for the fact that it bothers me that the CCP has so much influence over our politicians and our business owners. So don't you think it's up to our government, though, to create policies that prevent these things from happening, Jason?
You're absolutely right. It is up to the government. I've always been a big believer the government should have roles in mediating things like this. But unfortunately, when the government is really tied to the CCP, it makes it difficult when there's just more strands in this rope kind of tying them together, and Liz Cheney's husband is one of them. So, like you said, it could be a nothing burger, but we live in a world where things aren't done directly, and we'll see that with a later story. Right. But there's intermediaries and go-betweens, and it could be a nothing burger. It very well could be a nothing burger, or it could be a something burger.
Right. So something to definitely look out for, right?
Yeah. But we might never find out, and that's okay. We're just throwing up there. There's a potential conflict of interest.
Yeah, definitely. With a lot of them, honestly, right? So
our whole government's bought and paid for by the Chinese.
It really, it's so
upsetting. From the top to bottom, it is. And
yes.
The sooner that everybody accepts that, the sooner it's easier for them to see what's going on.
So I'm more mad at our government for allowing these transactions to continue to go forward, though I know we're working on it. So Jason.
Yeah, we'll see. It looks like American politics is a work in progress, as always. And Chinese politics as well, Chinese politics. So let's move on to something a little bit less political. So what's going on with the census?
Right.
Looks like we could have a couple states change hands, possibly, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm going to cover the Chinese census because that's what I was researching on, even though I did look at the American census. So I'll quickly talk about the Chinese census. So in completely unsurprising news, the census confirmed that China's population is getting older. And Jason, I got to tell you, that's not good news for China. Unless China is willing to go embrace immigration, which I hear they are not.
Never.
Right.
Ever.
So why is this not good for China? Well, because China is not yet a wealthy country for the average Chinese citizen. Unless you are a member of like the Fu Dai or in the CCP. Fu Dai is the rich second generation of Chinese kids who like literally burn money for fun because they have so much of it. It's pretty off-putting. Because of China's one-child policy, you basically have one child that has to take care of their 4 grandparents, 2 parents, instead of the child using their earnings to invest. Chinese millennials tend to save all their money to ensure that there will be enough to support their aging families. So basically, China is asking a child to support 6 elderly people. This is quite a stunt on innovation and investments if kids don't have money to invest in their future, but they just have to save money to take care of their elders.
So this is something, though, that's not... Everybody saw this coming 20, 25 years ago. Everybody saw it with the one-child policy, and it's going to create greater state dependence. The problem is, like you mentioned, Angel, China isn't rich enough right now to be able to offer all the social services at the levels that are required in a true first world country to maintain this. They have over a billion people. How are you going to support hundreds of millions of elderly? Where are the homes for hundreds of millions of elderly?
Right.
They certainly can't live with their grandkids because they only have one.
They do.
One China policies. Yeah, well, maybe. God, that's a crazy house.
Well, that's actually the norm in China, to live 3 generations under one roof.
Right, but but the idea though is that are you going to be able to? You're right though. How do people plan for their future? How can they go out and make money while they're basically supporting that many elderly?
Right.
Because the government maybe can't do it.
Right. Right. I mean, I know that this is on top of China's agenda, so maybe they have a plan for this. I never like to discount China, but Jason, the American census also just came out as well. And I know I'm devastated that New York just lost a House chair by just 79 people. So if 79 people just filled out their freaking census, we wouldn't have lost that 1 seat. So that kills me. I don't know if you did any more research on the U.S. Census. It's totally okay if you didn't. I just know, I think Texas gained a seat, 2 others, Florida gained a seat, New York, and I believe Cali lost a seat. So
yeah, what we're seeing is a movement more towards the Sun Belt, towards the Old South. Did North Carolina gain one too? The North Carolina, Virginia, I don't think gained any, which surprised me. North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and then over to Texas and Tennessee as well.
Right.
You're seeing the movement there. You're seeing the movement down to Arizona even. New Mexico, not as much. The interesting thing, though, is that you always saw a lot of population growth in California, where now that population growth is actually changing and moving out of California to Arizona, to Nevada, to Oregon, even to Washington, and Idaho is a big one now, too. A lot of Republicans in California, frankly, are just leaving because they don't like the politics. They're going to all those places.
Right. And
so that's kind of the story of it on the West Coast. On the
Right.
East Coast, with New York losing its seat, it's more people moving in the South.
No, I think another reason why like for instance, like this was the slowest population growth in like the X amount of census that we've done, and we do a census every 10 years in America. And I honestly think one of a big contributing factor to not actually getting like accurate census results was because of Trump's immigration policy and like ICE and everything. Because I've had relatives who literally did not come out of their homes, did not drive their cars because they were scared of getting pulled over and getting deported and going back to China. So I can't imagine that they would want to fill out the census,
Right, but the argument is always that the census, because the census is used for representation in Congress, representative of voters, that using the census for non-citizens or non-green card holders should not be included, or individuals who don't meet those categories should not be included. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, I don't know if that necessarily was a big reason why. Because when you're looking at percentages, do you think 1 million people stayed or didn't fill it out because of that? Do you think 2 million? Because when you get in the higher percentages of growth, you need larger numbers to maintain this.
I think this is just my personal opinion, but I just think because of COVID, because of the fears of immigration, the aggressive ICE policies, I think because of that, we don't have an accurate census. But that's just my sense of things. We could be wrong, but let's move on to the next story of the day, which I know you are very excited to tell us about. So it's about the exchange between Dr. Anthony Fauci and Paul Rand. So Jason's got the latest and greatest on this exchange. Jason, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so Dr. Fauci is a public servant, obviously, so he has to go into Congress and give updates all the time to the various Senate committees and House committees. Yesterday, we had a heated exchange between him and Republican Senator Rand Paul from the state of Kentucky, who is actually a doctor himself, so this isn't all just bluster from somebody with no knowledge. But we found out some new information and connections from him with regards to COVID-19 and possibly the Wuhan lab. Dr. Paul pressed Dr. Fauci on a funding trail most people aren't familiar with. I wasn't familiar with before hearing about it. That really kind of blew the narrative on COVID wide open. Dr. Fauci very specifically said throughout this that the NIH, or National Institutes of Health, or the NIAID, which is their arm to give out funding, has not and has never directly funded research at the Wuhan lab regarding what's called gain-of-function tests.
Interesting. So what does that mean? What is the gain-of-function test?
So what's interesting about gain-of-function tests, it's when you take a virus from an animal that is benign to humans. So basically just a random virus that can't infect humans. You tweak it a little bit to make it infectious in humans, and you kind of, for lack of a better, you kind of jack it up and make it more powerful. So it becomes a potential super virus. So now you're putting things into an animal virus to increase its effectiveness in humans and also allowing it to get transmitted in humans even. So basically gain of function means you're gaining the function of that virus. You're gaining the function in a human population. So what happened? Rand Paul called out Fauci on sending money to the Wuhan Institute. When Rand Paul claimed they used an intermediary, Dr. Fauci sidestepped and said, quote, "Let me tell you why that was done," unquote. I'm obviously taking a piece of the quote out, which then claimed the money was sent through a company called Echo Health Alliance to investigate the origins of COVID-19. Dr. Fauci categorically denies that the NIH sent money to the Wuhan lab, but the NIH, which was headed by Dr. Fauci, sent $3.7 million to Echo Health Alliance, who then sent $600,000 of that to the Wuhan lab. Whether or not that was to investigate it is another story. But Dr. Fauci also denied that the NIH was involved in any gain-of-function research. but Rand Paul then called his bluff on that as well. And like you were telling me earlier, Angel, this is where it gets interesting, right? This is where I think Dr. Fauci really stepped in it. One of the virologists at the Wuhan lab, Dr. Shi Zhang, published a research paper specifying her gain-of-function research. So we know these gain-of-function tests were done in the Wuhan lab because one of their leading virologists published a research paper on it. This paper was even reviewed by MIT, okay? So it was accepted in America. Included in her sponsors of the research, which every research paper needs to have, were listed Dr. Fauci and the NIAID. So they, according to her, sponsored her research. Dr. Fauci didn't respond to this claim, probably rightly so, and that's fine. You might not believe everything because you could be thinking it's one-sided because it's Rand Paul and he's a Republican. That's fair. He's brought this up before in the Senate. It's Dr. Fauci with various theories that the virus came from the Wuhan lab and was not naturally transmitted from bats, which is the basic understanding, I guess. But from New York Magazine earlier last year, there were two scientists, Dr. Barrick from North Carolina, who does get funding from the NIAID, and Dr. Shi Zhang, worked together to, quote, this is New York Magazine, so this is certainly not a Fox News, quote, insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the SARS virus, of the SARS virus, then used in the man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. And that's pretty interesting.
Right. That is super duper interesting.
It's not it. There's a lot more.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. There's a lot more, but I know I'm always like looking at the clock and making sure we don't go over. So I just want to make sure you get to the last topic of the day that I know we both wanted to discuss as well, if you don't mind. Hold on, because this is very important. Yes.
So Dr. Fauci claims that the COVID-19 mutations were random and not designed by man. But the technique that Dr. Barrick developed in his North Carolina lab forces mutations in serial passages through cell culture. So basically, it's working through a cell multiple times, and so that mutations eventually appear, and then they look like they're natural. So Dr. Barrick, I wouldn't say patented it, but he named this technique the, quote, no-see-um technique because the mutations appear to be natural, but they're not. Nicholas Baker of New York Magazine said, quote, nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in the lab or grown in nature. So Dr. Fauci admitted Dr. Barrick has done his research in North Carolina and has received funding. There's also an email train talking about stopping funding to the Wuhan lab from one of Dr. Fauci's deputies at the NIH. So there's a lot more than just what appears here. Right. And this is astonishing new information. Most people probably won't pick it up, but, eventually somebody's going to have to answer for it.
Right. And that's interesting, because I've also been reading more and more reputable scientists come out and say that they believe that this was a man-made virus that came out of the Wuhan lab. A lot of them are almost positive. I do not want to support any conspiracy theories. That's why Jason and I didn't really want to cover this story until it's fully fleshed out. So when we get more information on this, we'll definitely be following up on this. But so that was really interesting information, and I know we're going to continue discussing this in the upcoming weeks. But the last thing that I know we wanted to cover was, so other than the interesting exchange between Dr. Fauci and Rand, which is always enlightening. Moving on to our last topic of the day, Jason's going to tell us what's going on in Israel and Palestine this week and why it's making international news.
Yes, this week. So in one of the first tests for the Biden presidency right now, we have an uptick in violence in Israel and Palestine. Israel slated to begin their largest military maneuvers ever as a nation in what's called their Chariots of Fire military exercise. this past Sunday, which was supposed to simulate a full month of war against the country from all sides. So all-out war against Israel, something they've actually feared now for their entire existence.
Right.
So they were simulating this, and there were some issues at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem, which is the holiest site, or one of the holiest sites in Islam, and considered the holiest site in Judaism. And so there were some Palestinians there and there was some violence, and the Israeli Defense Force took some individuals, and I know that the Palestinians aren't happy with their policing and the way that they occupied the mosque. So they gave them a target date to get out, and they did not, obviously, because the IDF, or Israeli Defense Force, believes they have every right to be there. And the Palestinians launched rockets, 6 of which were aimed for Jerusalem, which actually doesn't happen very often. But they launched hundreds of rockets. This is the worst violence since 7 years now, 2014. But in retaliation, the Israelis launched numerous airstrikes. There's hundreds of Palestinians dead or injured. But it does look like things might be kind of de-escalating.
Great.
There is a prayer line at the mosque as of yesterday morning. So it looks as though, maybe not cooler heads, but the violence is de-escalating. So
yeah, that's good.
I know the Biden administration said they were sending an envoy over. I'm not sure at this point what they can even do, to be honest.
Right.
Do you?
No. I mean, Israel versus Palestine, like, come on. It's like one of the hardest things that like nobody can figure out, right? So, I expect the conflict to continue until some genius comes along and like comes up with a diplomatic solution that we haven't for the past, 90 years, 70 years.
Well,
so,
I mean, a year ago, it looked like we were heading to peace there with a lot of peace deals.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of, I don't know if we're sidestepping or backstepping, but we're definitely not going on the same path.
Yeah, for sure. But that's all the time that we have today. I know we covered a lot of topics. We went from Liz Cheney to Dr. Fauci to like everywhere. So for any of you guys that have questions, leave your feedback, leave your comments. We always read them. Jason and I definitely incorporate all your constructive criticisms and your feedback into our shows. So yes, please just tweet us, leave us comments, and we'll definitely read them. We'll definitely answer. And Jason, any last parting words?
Nope. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week right here on Liberated Panda 2nd Gen channel, 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.